I still remember the smell of flour and burnt oil hanging in the still, blue air of the pre-dawn factory floor, the strange hush over the machines, and the clatter of boots on cracked concrete. My hands were sticky with sugar and sweat, palms hot and rough from lifting tray after tray of cheap donuts, for a wage that wouldn't last 2 weeks in a city like Johannesburg. And that particular morning, the whistle from Mavis, our floor manager, was sharper than usual, her eyes restless as she waved us into a huddle near the battered staff lockers. I had known it in my bones before she spoke. Even as the dawn crept in through the greasy windows, catching on clouds of flour in the air, I felt the cold certainty walk up my spine. There'd been too many rumors, the boss's too silent, overtime cut to the bone. Now it came, a list of names, quick and brutal. My own was the second read out. You're all dismissed, effective immediately, go sign at the office. No preamble, no explanation, the world spun surprisingly quiet. I glanced around at the others, some angry, some shrugging, most just numb. I tried to hold on to some dignity as I unclipped my name tag and slipped out. Walking home in the half-light, my uniform bundled under my arm, I felt the sting of shame crawl up my neck. I knew what waited for me. The flat was still dark, my brother David just up from his night shift at the garage, his breakfast, a sorry mess of white bread and tea, abandoned on the table. He shook his head as I told him, not unkind, but with that look as if this was inevitable, another mark against me. I told you, Raphael, he muttered, factory jobs aren't for dreamers. You need to think practical. I didn't reply. I went to shower the flour from my forearms, scrubbing harder at the veins of oil embedded in my hands, but no amount of soap could soften that sense of failure. I traced the line of my cheek in the mirror after, watching my own eyes, and whispered, this isn't me, not forever. It wasn't the loss of the job that hurt the most. It was that the last trace of hope, my secret hope, felt further away than ever. I had always loved baking, not just the quick, rough factory stuff, but the intricate dance of home flour, the smell of caramelizing butter, the soft push of yeast. I baked late at night when the house was quiet, using scraps and oddments, trying recipes I copied into a battered notebook. It calmed me, made something beautiful from a world that so often seemed ugly, but to everyone else, baking was a hobby, a distraction for children or servants. To dream of being a pastry chef here of all places was childish. At family gatherings, my aunts would roll their eyes and laugh. You, a chef, so who's going to pay for that? Will you sell scones on a corner? My mother, world-worn and gentle, said nothing, only watched with troubled eyes, her silence a weight. My cousin Themba made a show at his wedding, clapping me on the back and announcing, Raphael bakes cupcakes, maybe she'll save us from poverty. Laughter followed, but I felt the sting in my ribs. Among my own, I was the butt of a never-funny joke. After that morning, the days blurred into one another. I queued for the job center, submitted CVs to offices and shops, but the only work was casual or dodgy. I tried to lift myself, taking the odd cleaning stint, helping my neighbor's sister sell fetcook outside the stations. Each rejection bruised me a little more. When the days got too heavy, I'd bake at night, in that hush when the city was a sea of distant headlights and far-off sirens. I made chew pastry for the first time, learned to whisk in the air and fold gently, to coax eggs and flour into something impossibly light. I experimented with filling, impossible combinations on our tight budget, but I made do. I found that in my hands, the kitchen was the one place where failure could be eaten, transformed, tried again. One Tuesday, I carried a box of homemade eclairs to my cousin's braai. He was getting married, and the smell of roast meat and beer drifted down the driveway, laughter so loud it bruised the sky. I put out the sweets at the edge of the table, shy, and kept away from the crowd. When dessert time came, my cousin's friends dug in, asking what bakery had made such things. When Themba found out I'd baked them, he nearly choked. You, come now, who helped you? Don't lie. Everyone laughed. I tried to smile. But a little fire sparked inside, in their surprise, in their disbelief. If I could give them something new, if I could surprise them, maybe I could do more. With the severance money from the factory, barely enough for rent, I bought a used standing mixer hidden in my room. Quietly, steadily, I started selling pastries to neighbors, using WhatsApp to offer them weekly boxes. At first, it was nothing, a few aunties, the hair salon owner, the teachers at the school. But my eclairs and chew, my little tarts and cakes got shared. Week by week, my phone pinged with new numbers. The nights grew longer, my hands more confident. My brother thought I was mad. You're going to waste money on flour and sugar while rent's overdue. Be serious, sister. I told him I couldn't explain, I just felt this was something real. But Johannesburg is not kind to small dreams. A year after losing the factory job, I was deeper in debt, landlords were less patient, and suppliers wouldn't extend credit. My oven, ancient before I got it, kept breaking down. Still, each setback taught me, made me knuckle down, cut costs, learn about dough temperature and humidity, and how to pack pastries for a taxi ride across Soweto in the heat. On bad weeks, I considered giving up. I'd stand on the balcony, looking out at the spread of city lights under the dust-filtered sky, and try to imagine myself as someone who did something ordinary. I never could. One day, a customer, Mrs. Nkosi, who ran a coffee shop in Melville, asked if I could bake for her cafe. Her regular supplier had let her down. My first delivery was late. I nearly burnt the chew, and getting across town with a half-broken cooler bag was a nightmare, but her customers praised the pastries. She offered a regular gig, and soon other cafes came calling. I built a tiny brand, Patisserie Refill, handwritten stickers, cheap boxes, my aunt's old cooler bags. Instagram did the rest. Somewhere along the way, my family stopped laughing. But the memory of their mockery hardened into something sharp inside me. I stopped hearing gratitude in their voices. I only heard doubt. It drove me, made me hungry to prove, not just to survive, but to show them all. Every rand I earned, I saved. At first, it went to rent and food, then to a better oven, then to a microloan for a shared kitchen space far from my home suburb. Each month I learned more about costings, health certificates, marketing, things no one had taught me. There was no map. Each step felt like walking on glass. 3 years after that dawn on the factory floor, I entered the Johannesburg Food Festival's pastry competition. It was a long shot. Most entrants came from fancy culinary schools, bearing French names and chef's jackets with sponsors and TV features. My application was handwritten. I wore an old shirt and my grandmother's apron with the faded sunflowers. The competition was brutal. 10 hours in a rented kitchen, judges peering over my shoulder, flour and nerves wrecking my hands. I burnt the first tray of canelés, nearly cried over a split ganache, and yet the second tray perfect. My eclairs shone like lacquered wood, filled with a passion fruit cream I'd practiced 100 times in my tiny flat. I felt them watching me, skeptical. I could smell the doubt in the air, but I worked as if my life depended on it, which in some ways it did. When the judges announced the 3 finalists, my name came last. Refill Mokena with her South African-inspired patisserie. I looked out from the stage and recognized in the front of the audience my brother and my mother, nervous, a little awkward there because I'd begged them. In row 3, my cousin Themba, arms crossed, half smiling. I thought of leaving right then, but when they called my name again, winner, that hush inside me broke. I cried right there, holding a plastic trophy and a voucher for a culinary course in Paris. The victory was not glamour, it was not riches. My hands shook as I thanked the judges as the cameras flickered, but when I stood off stage, still in flour-stained shoes, my family gathered around me. My mother hugged me, silent but fierce, and did not let go. That win opened doors. I juggled pastry deliveries and lessons, bakery orders and pop-up events. By the following year, I'd saved up enough, along with a small grant and a bruising loan from a microfinance program, to open my own patisserie in Maboneng precinct. It was a narrow shopfront with mismatched chairs, a tiled counter, walls the yellow of summer corn. I called it Sunbird. My pastries drew on South African flavors, guava, rooibos, naki, amayala, twisted into classic French forms. Opening day came with its own shame and terror. My family arrived late, standing in the doorway as the shop filled. They didn't know how to order, what the names meant on the board. I watched them hover at the edge, not quite belonging, but I wanted so badly for them to see me, to witness what I'd built. And so, for months, business grew. The queue sometimes out the door, emails from magazines, visits from chefs whose names I'd only seen in books. But I ached for something else. I wanted my family to look at me the way those strangers did, to see more than the foolish girl with flour in her hair. One spring morning, I got a call from producer at a television program. They were filming an episode about local champions, those who'd risen from nothing, whose roots were deep in Johannesburg's soil. I wanted to say no, to hide, but I agreed. Maybe, I thought, if they saw me from the outside, they'd understand. The crew set up early at Sunbird, moving lights and cables, arranging pastries like museum pieces. I wore my best apron, hair tied up, nerves gnawing holes in my stomach. My mother came, dressed in her church best. My brother arrived late, and even Themba, my old tormentor, eased in, arms folded, eyes sharp as ever. Old neighbors crowded the doorway, peering in. The presenter asked about my journey, how I started, why I chose this path. I spoke as simply as I could. I told them about the scent of dough at midnight, about being mocked, about losing jobs and dignity but not my hands. I spoke about shame and hunger and beauty, the courage it took to choose a dream over safety day after day. When the segment aired, they included a special event, an open tasting at the shop. That afternoon, my family, neighbors, old factory friends, and a scattering of past skeptics filled the small space. The presenter handed out little plates, and everyone tasted the confections. Milk tart chew, Myla chocolate tarts, sorghum financiers. The room hushed, mouths full, eyes wide. I watched them bar. My cousin pick up a Naki honey madeleine. For a moment he paused, studied it as if expecting to find a flaw. Then he took a bite. His face changed, almost against his will. The skepticism faded, replaced by something quieter. He finished it before he knew it. Aunties clapped. My brother grinned, that stoic mask slipping. My mother's eyes shone, a smile breaking the years of worry on her face. That was the moment, the one I'd chased across 100 nightmares. I saw the concrete proof of my success reflected back, not just in the crowd, not in the press or cameras, but in the faces I'd wanted so desperately to reach. My family tasting something they once dismissed as fantasy, now delighting in it, proud. I thought of that first dawn, the factory floor, the shame of dismissal, how small I'd felt. I thought of the lonely years, the ridicule, the fear of never being seen. But I stood at the front of my own shop, shoulders back, flour on my hands, and watched them eat. In their joy, in that recognition, I returned home to myself at last. Now, each night after I close Sunbird, I sweep the floor, feeling the soft ache of a long day well spent. The city outside hums on, neon in the dark. Sometimes my mother sits at a table, sipping rooibos tea, and watches me work. Sometimes my brother drops by, offering advice or talking nonsense. Even them brags now, telling anyone who'll listen, that's my cousin, the best pastry chef in Joburg. I forgive their laughter, their doubts. I see now that courage needs something to push against. I see that shame can bloom into strength if you refuse to surrender your dream. As the night deepens and the last crumb is swept away, I catch my reflection in the glass. I see a woman made whole by her own labor, a baker of sweetness in a harsh city, the proof of her success living not just in fame or fortune, but in the warmth that returns at last to her table and to her heart.